The scent of old money, that dusty, warm aroma of polished mahogany and fading lilies, was my constant companion now. It clung to the heavy damask drapes, seeped into the velvet upholstery of the chaise lounge where I currently reclined, and even permeated my silk pajamas, whispering promises of security and comfort. A security I fiercely guarded, a comfort I clutched with avaricious hands, because I knew intimately what it was to truly struggle. In my past life, poverty was a stench that clung to my skin, a gnawing ache in my gut that no amount of dreaming could satiate. I remembered the taste of stale bread, the chill of threadbare blankets, the constant suffocating fear of the next meal, or lack thereof. So, when I woke up one Tuesday morning, not in a hospital or a back alleyway, after getting ran over by a car after fighting another beggar over an empty bottle, in the sprawling, obscenely opulent master suite of Elise Vance, a secondary female lead in some sappy romance novel, I'd skimmed. My first instinct wasn't confusion, but a profound, almost dizzying gratitude. I was Elise Vance. Holy shit! Rich beyond reckoning, beautiful in that perfect porcelain doll way that always felt a little too breakable, with delicate little hands that had never smooshed a water bottle in her life, and, according to the novel, destined to be the main female lead's pathetic, heartbroken simp. A golden retriever with unlimited funds, chasing after the elusive affections of the dazzling, yet perpetually troubled, main female lead, Seraphina Thorne. The novel painted Seraphina as a delicate flower, a pure white lotus, whose tragic backstory and effortless charm captivated everyone, especially Elise Vance, who was supposed to shower her with gifts, bail her out of every scrape, and generally act as her walking, talking, incredibly rich ATM, only to be tossed aside for the main male lead, or some other equally brooding love interest after being sucked dry. Upon realizing this, my stomach, still conditioned to clench at the thought of scarcity, did a flip. Oh, hell no. I, who had once debated extensively in my head whether I could afford the cheaper menstrual pads, or if toilet paper would have to suffice, was not about to bankroll someone else's emotional roller coaster. My love affair with money began the moment I realized I had it. Not a small sum, not enough to be comfortable, but fathomless wealth. The kind of money that made walls whisper security, floors hum with warmth, and my heart beat a steady, joyful rhythm. No one, and I mean no one, was going to take my money away, not even a fictional protagonist with plot armor and main character energy. The first encounter was, in hindsight, remarkably swift and decisive. I was enjoying a particularly ripe, perfectly sliced mango on my sun-drenched terrace, the juice sticky sweet on my fingertips. The morning air, perfumed with jasmine and the distant tang of the ocean, was crisp and invigorating. I ignored literally anyone and everyone who called on my phone. I was wearing an absurdly expensive silk robe that whispered against my skin like a lover's caress, my fingers lined with the shiniest rings I could find in my wardrobe, and my biggest concern was whether my personal chef had managed to source the exact type of artisanal cheese I'd woken up craving. Life was good. Then, the delicate chiming of the antique doorbell cut through my luxurious reverie. My butler, an impeccably stoic man named Jeeves, the irony was not lost on me, informed me that Miss Seraphina Thorne was requesting my presence. My brow furrowed. I hadn't even finished my mango. Send her in, I sighed, picking up a silver napkin to dab at my lips. I wondered what urgent crisis had befallen the main female lead this early. A distressed damsel, no doubt. The novel was practically dripping with them, but I skimmed it. Seraphina floated onto the terrace like a particularly aggrieved swan. Her hair, the exact shade of spun moonlight, shimmered around her shoulders. Her eyes, supposedly the colour of a summer sky after a spring rain, were currently wide, and glistening, though I suspected a few artfully deployed eye drops were involved. She clutched a designer handbag to her chest, its pristine leather a stark contrast to her slightly rumpled but still expensive dress. She was, as the novel described, breathtakingly beautiful. A beauty I was apparently supposed to grovel before. Elise. Oh, Elise, I'm so glad you're here. Her voice was a soft, trembling melody, designed, I presumed, to pull at heartstrings. Mine, however, were made of pure gold, and far less impressionable. It's terrible. My family's shares. There's been a sudden downturn, a terrible unforeseen circumstance, and I need a substantial sum to prevent utter ruin. She wrung her hands, those delicate, manicured hands, and looked at me with an expression of such wide-eyed desperation that in my past life I might have felt a distant pangs of sympathy for anyone in trouble. But this wasn't my past life. This was my money. Money that had been someone else's, yes, but was now mine. Money I hadn't earned through grueling labour and sacrifice, but had simply inherited, along with a ridiculously attractive body and a sprawling estate. And I intended to keep it. My gaze drifted from Serafina's pleading face to the half-eaten mango, a vision of exotic sweetness. A substantial sum, she said, for her family's shares, a downturn, unforeseen circumstances. Right. The novel had mentioned Serafina's family was always on the verge of financial collapse, a convenient plot device to keep her perpetually in need of rescue, usually from Elise's deep pockets. I chewed slowly, letting the mango sweetness explode on my tongue. Is that so? I asked, my voice calm, almost detached. My lips curved into a faint, saccharine smile. Serafina nodded, her moonlight hair swaying. Yes, it's millions, Elise, millions. Without it, we'll lose everything. Our ancestral home, our reputations, as everything. She took a step closer, her hand reaching out as if to grasp my arm. I flinched imperceptibly. Touching me was not in the contract. We? Who's we in this conversation? My mind raced. Millions. That's many, many mangoes. That's a new wing for the mansion, perhaps. Or simply more money tucked away, accumulating interest, laughing in the face of my past self's destitution. The thought of it leaving my accounts, a cold dread familiar from my previous life, snaked its way around my heart. It was irrational, perhaps, but potent. My hand moved almost without conscious thought. It was a swift, clean motion, honed by years of swatting at other fellow beggars who dared enter my trash-heap domain. The sound was sharp, a startling crack that cut through the gentle morning air. Smack! Serafina froze, her eyes wide, no longer shimmering with feigned tears, but with genuine shock. Her cheek, a moment ago pristine and delicately flushed, bloomed angry red. Her carefully crafted coiffure, dislodged by the force, framed a face contorted in disbelief. A tear, real this time, welled up and tracked a path through her smeared foundation. I watched, fascinated, as her perfectly symmetrical features crumpled. A small, almost imperceptible tremor ran through my hand. Ah, yes, that was oddly satisfying. Millions? I repeated, my voice still silky smooth, though a touch colder now. My dear Serafina, you want to touch my millions? Why don't you just rob a bank, then? She stammered, sputtering. Elisa, how could you? What was that for? I lifted my chin, a cool aristocratic gesture I was quickly mastering. For rudeness and for audacious entitlement. Now, if you will excuse me, my mango is getting warm. Jeeves, who had been hovering discreetly, looking as though he'd seen far worse in his long, illustrious career of butling, stepped forward. Miss Thorne, perhaps you should allow me to escort you out. Serafina opened her mouth, perhaps to unleash a torrent of dramatic indignation, but no sound came out. She merely glared at me, her previously beautiful face a mask of wounded pride and burgeoning fury, before turning on her heel and practically stomping out, her designer handbag swinging wildly. The jasmine-scented air seemed to sigh in relief. I took another bite of mango. It tasted even sweeter now. The next confrontation was approximately 3 weeks later. In the interim, Serafina had apparently been telling anyone who would listen about my unfathomable cruelty and inexplicable violence, which, surprisingly, did little to hurt my reputation. If anything, it merely solidified my image as the aloof, eccentric heiress who tolerated no nonsense. Old money can get away with a lot, it turns out. Who knew? Certainly not my past self, who had to be polite to anyone not wearing rags out of sheer necessity in order to snatch a coin from them. I was at my private equestrian estate, a sprawling expanse of emerald green manicured lawns and stately stables filled with thoroughbreds whose bloodlines were probably more storied than most royal families. The wind sang through the tall pines, carrying the earthy scents of horse, leather, and rich soil. I found a deep, almost primal satisfaction in grooming my favourite mare, a sleek black beauty named Obsidian, her coat like polished obsidian under my gloved hand, the rhythmic thwack of the brush against her flank, the soft whicker she gave in response. It was profoundly grounding. Obsidian smelled like horse shit and money. And I love money. Then, the familiar unwelcome flutter of a white dove against the blue sky of my piece. Serafina. She arrived in a sleek, silver convertible, kicking up dust on the gravel driveway. Her expression was set, determined. Less swan, more hawk this time, though still a very beautiful hawk. She was, again, impeccably dressed, this time in a riding ensemble that looked like it had cost more than my first car, the one that consistently broke down. She strode right into the stable, her expensive riding boots clacking on the cobblestones. The smell of horse manure, usually comforting, clearly displeased her delicate sensibilities, as evidenced by a subtle wrinkle of her nose. Obsidian, sensing the intrusion, let out a low snort, shaking her magnificent head. "Elise, we need to talk. This is urgent," she declared, her voice echoing slightly in the high-ceilinged stable. "It's about the Miller's Ridge land." I kept brushing Obsidian, my movements slow and deliberate. "Is it?" I asked, not looking at her. I wasn't aware we had anything to discuss regarding Miller's Ridge. "Don't play coy," she snapped, a hint of steel in her voice that was new. "You know perfectly well why I'm here. That land, Elise, is vital. It's for Julian. His venture, his dream, his entire future depends on securing that plot." Julian. Ah, yes. Serafina's brooding, financially challenged first love, the one destined to eventually break her heart, but only after she, and by extension, Elise, had poured fortunes into his various doomed enterprises. The novel had a whole chapter dedicated to this particular land deal, a critical component of Julian's grand vision for an eco-resort that was, naturally, going to fail spectacularly, dragging Serafina's emotionally invested self down with it. My grip tightened on the brush. That land, Miller's Ridge. I'd actually looked into it after reading about it in the novel. It was stunning. Rolling hills, old-growth forests, a pristine river cutting through it, and, more importantly, nestled at the edge of the property was a small, unassuming geological formation that contained a rather significant deposit of a rare earth mineral. A mineral that, according to my newfound corporate espionage team, aka a very expensive geology firm I'd hired in a fit of acquisitive delight, was about to skyrocket in value. A multi-million-dollar mineral just sitting there waiting for someone to notice. "Julian," I mused aloud, finally turning to face her, a faint, almost pitying smile on my lips. "Yes, I am vaguely aware of his various aspirations." Serafina puffed out her chest. "His aspirations are noble. He intends to create a sustainable, eco-friendly community there, a beacon of responsible development. A beacon of irresponsible insolvency, more like, I murmured under my breath, but loud enough for her to hear. Her eyes narrowed. Elise, you have so much land. You own half the county. Why do you need Miller's Ridge? Don't you see how important this is for Julian? For us? For our future? Her voice swelled with a dramatic urgency, as if the fate of the world rested on her obtaining this particular parcel of dirt. My past self, the one who dreamed of having a stable roof over her head, one who understood the desperation behind wanting something so badly it hurt, felt a phantom tug. But that tug was immediately overridden by the roar of my current, deeply ingrained financial conservatism against spending it on anything or anyone that wasn't me. Future? Our future? Her future, with Julian, was a train wreck I had no intention of funding. And more importantly, the mineral deposit. My mineral deposit, if I played my cards right. It was a gold mine, metaphorically and almost literally. Giving it up for Julian's doomed eco-resort? That was not just foolish. It was an insult to the very concept of wealth accumulation. My hand, still lightly powdered with horse dander, rose. This time there was a little less hesitation, a little more practiced ease. Smack! The sound was even louder in the enclosed space of the stable, echoing off the wooden beams. Obsidian snorted again, dancing nervously in her stall. Seraphina staggered back, her perfect hair once again dislodged, her cheek reddening even faster this time, a bright red outline of my hand appearing on her skin. The scent of her expensive perfume mingled with the faint metallic tang of an impending nosebleed. Elise! She shrieked, pressing a hand to her throbbing cheek. You hit me again! What is wrong with you? Refusing to participate in your financial foolishness, I stated plainly, my voice devoid of emotion, and acquiring valuable real estate. Nothing is wrong with me, Seraphina. Something is quite wrong with your understanding of personal property. The land is not yours to demand, nor is it Julian's to fritter away. Before she could form another scathing retort, I turned to Jeeves, who had appeared as if by magic, holding a riding crop. Oh, for God's sake, Jeeves, this isn't that kind of story. Jeeves, I said, ignoring the crop and his unnervingly blank expression, contact Mrs. Albright's office. Inform her that I've decided to proceed with the immediate acquisition of the Miller's Ridge property. All cash offer, close by end of week. Make it airtight. I'm feeling a sudden urge to develop a private nature preserve for rare earth mineral mining. Jeeves bowed, utterly unfazed. Right away, madam. He got used to my antics. The first round of several trucks laden with clothings mysteriously showed up at my door a few days ago. Seraphina stared at me, her eyes wide with a horrifying mix of pain, anger, and utter bafflement. You bought it, just like that, just to spite me? I offered her a cool, dismissive smile. To secure my assets, your spite is merely a coincidental bonus. She stood there, breathing heavily, her chest rising and falling beneath the expensive riding jacket. Then, with a furious, inarticulate cry, she spun around and stormed out of the stable, her boots once again clacking a furious rhythm against the cobblestones, the silver convertible roaring to life a moment later, spitting gravel as it sped away. I stroked Obsidian's nose, her soft muzzle nuzzling my hand. See, girl, I murmured, money solves everything, or at least prevents you from getting swindled. Obsidian whinnied softly, as if in agreement. I wondered if she'd like a stable made of solid gold. Probably not practical, but the idea was nice. The third instant unfolded amidst the opulent, hushed splendor of the annual Aurora Gala charity auction. The air shimmered with the combined scents of expensive perfumes, aged whiskey, and the sharp, almost painful sparkle of diamonds. We were in a cavernous ballroom, gilded to within an inch of its life, chandeliers dripping crystals from the impossibly high ceiling. Uniformed waiters moved like ghosts, offering flutes of champagne and delicate canapes. The wealthy, the influential, and the merely ostentatious mingled, their hushed conversations punctuated by the auctioneer's smooth, rapid patter. I was there, of course, because my reputation demanded it, and for the five-star food, and because, quite frankly, I enjoyed being around magnificent objects that were about to become even more magnificent once I owned them. Tonight's star lot was the Siren's Tear, a legendary sapphire necklace, rumoured to have once belonged to a forgotten queen, so blue it seemed to swallow the light. A multi-million-dollar masterpiece of glittering despair, as my internal monologue had dramatically dubbed it. The novel had clearly outlined this scene. Elise, utterly enchanted by Seraphina's pure heart, would accompany her to the auction, and then, spurred by Seraphina's wistful sigh about how beautiful it would look on you, Elise, and how much good it could do if you later sold it for charity, after bestowing it upon me to wear to all the important social events first, would then gallantly bid for it, secure it, and then, of course, meekly present it to Seraphina. Another plot device for Seraphina to gain access to high society, while Elise was left holding the bill and a perpetually unanswered affection. A plot device that was now going to be smashed by me. I was sipping a glass of an exquisite oaky Chardonnay, admiring the gleam of the diamond Curie earrings I hadn't bought for anyone but myself, when Seraphina materialized beside me. She was wearing a gown of midnight blue, designed to enhance her ethereal beauty, and, currently, her eyes were fixated on the brochure for the Siren's Tear. "Elise," she breathed, her voice a theatrical whisper that managed to carry across the low din of the room. "Isn't it magnificent? The Siren's Tear. Oh, to wear something of such exquisite history. It would be a dream." I took another thoughtful sip of my wine. "It is indeed a rather large rock," I agreed. "And quite old. Good investment, probably. Diversification." Her perfectly sculpted eyebrows arched. "Investment? Elise, it's art. It's beauty. It's perfect." She then turned her full, dazzling gaze upon me, her eyes brimming with a familiar, manufactured longing. "You simply must bid on it, for me. Imagine the good you would do, the attention it would bring to my upcoming charity gala next month if I wore it." My internal monologue, a cynical Greek chorus, groaned. My upcoming charity gala. Of course, another opportunity for Seraphina to bask in reflected glory, while I footed the bill and provided the flashy props. "You want me to bid on a multi-million-dollar necklace," I said, my voice dangerously calm, "and then just give it to you to wear so you can leverage its fame for your gala?" She nodded eagerly, a faint blush staining her cheeks, making her look even more pure and innocent. "Oh, if you would, Elise. You are so generous, so kind. No one else has your refined eye for beauty or your boundless resources." She actually grasped my arm this time, her fingers cold and delicate, closing around my bicep. The scent of her expensive, cloying perfume almost made me gag. The audacity of it. The sheer, unmitigated gall. She wasn't even subtle anymore. She was demanding. She wasn't asking for help. She was instructing me with the casual arrogance of someone who expected nothing less than instant gratification from her designated sugar mummy, as if the two slaps from me were glitches in my programming. Such a blow was deep and cutting to my poor heart. I needed to do something about it. The image of the necklace, a glittering blue beacon of wealth, flashed in my mind. Mine. It should be mine. My mind went back to my past life, to the aching desire for something, anything, beautiful that I could truly call my own. A cheap trinket from a flea market had once been a luxury. Now, faced with the opportunity to claim a piece of history, a physical manifestation of unapologetic extravagance, for myself, my hand, holding the wine glass, lowered slowly. My other hand, free and unencumbered, rose. The movement was economical, precise. This time there was a public audience. A hush fell, not because of me, but because the current lot had just closed. Perfect timing. Smack! The sound was shockingly loud in the momentary silence of the ballroom. A collective gasp rippled through the gathered elite. Serafina's head snapped back, her carefully applied makeup smearing, her brilliant blue gown suddenly seeming less ethereal and more garish against her now scarlet cheek. Her delicate cry was choked off by the sheer force of the blow. The Chardonnay glass in my hand remained steady, not a single drop spilled. Impressive, even for me. "My dear Serafina," I intoned, my voice carrying clearly across the stunned silence, "you seem to misunderstand the nature of my boundless resources. They are boundless for me, not for you, and certainly not for your transparently self-serving charity gala." The auctioneer, a seasoned professional, quickly recovered, tapping his gavel and attempting to draw attention away from the unfolding drama. But all eyes were on Serafina, who stood frozen, tears welling in her eyes, her face a mask of mortification and incandescent rage. She felt like I stripped her naked, like I was the one asking her for a multi-million-dollar rock. "How dare you?" she hissed, finally finding her voice, though it was barely a whisper. Everyone was watching and snickering at her predicament. "In public, in front of everyone, you are a monster, Elise Vance." I merely arched a brow and ignored her, unperturbed. I glanced at the stage where the Siren's Tear was about to be presented again. "Madam Auctioneer," my voice cut through the lingering whispers. "My apologies for the slight interruption. I'd like to place an opening bid." I named a figure so absurdly high it made the previous bid sound like pocket change. A frantic flurry of activity ensued. My new, very expensive and very efficient personal assistant, a severe woman named Miss Clara Chun, who had replaced the perpetually flustered Mrs. Albright that Jeeves had initially contacted, appeared at my side, tablet in hand. She swiftly confirmed my bid. Serafina watched, horrified, as the auctioneer, a beatific smile on her face, brought down the gavel with a resounding thwack. "Sold to Miss Elise Vance." A smattering of polite applause filled the room. Not for Serafina, certainly not for her plight, but for the sheer audacity of my purchase, for the effortless display of wealth. It felt good, better than good. It felt like triumph. I turned back to Serafina, who looked as though she might spontaneously combust. "There, it's mine," I said, a genuine smile finally gracing my lips. "And it will look absolutely exquisite on me." The Siren's Tear seemed to wink at me from its velvet cushion. Such a glowing jewel was truly soothing to my heart after reeling from the sight of Serafina. She fled, of course, burst into truly spectacular, theatrical tears, and ran, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and scandalized whispers in her wake. I shrugged. "More champagne, please." The aftermath of the Siren's Tear incident was, predictably, a hurricane of societal judgment and whispers. My family, or rather the Vance family I had somehow inherited, were not amused. Aunt Lydia, a woman whose entire existence revolved around upholding appearances and decorum, cornered me in the ridiculously oversized sitting room of the main mansion. The air, usually thick with the scent of lilies, was now heavy with her disapproval and smelly old people perfume. "Elise, darling," she said, her voice dripping with venomous sweetness, like honey laced with arsenic. "This simply will not do. 3 times? 3 public humiliations of poor Serafina. First, financial impropriety, then land disputes, and now a physical assault in front of the entire philanthropic elite. It's scandalous. I reclined deeper into the plush velvet sofa, my silk-clad legs crossed elegantly. I merely asserted my boundaries, Aunt Lydia, and acquired some excellent assets. It truly is a lovely necklace, don't you think? The sapphire practically glows. She bridled, her face an alarming shade of puce. Boundaries? Elise, you've broken the girl. She's utterly distraught. She's had to resort to counselling. And now I hear she's been admitted to the hospital for severe emotional distress. My mental gears, usually well oiled by avarice, ground to a halt. Hospital, emotional distress, counselling. 3 therapy visits to be precise, according to Aunt Lydia's furious enumeration of Serafina's suffering. My past life self, the one who navigated life's complexities with a grim pragmatism, suddenly spoke up, a small, still voice in the back of my mind. Hitting someone 3 times publicly and causing them such distress that they end up in the hospital, that sounds less like asserting boundaries and more like... A chill ran down my spine despite the comforting warmth of the massive fireplace. The realization dawned on me, a slow, dawning horror mixed with a peculiar sort of amusement. "Oh," I said, the word barely a whisper, the Chardonnay suddenly tasting a little less crisp. "Oh, dear." Aunt Lydia, misinterpreting my sudden quietness as remorse, softened slightly, a predatory gleam in her eye. "See, darling, she's clearly fragile. Perhaps a small apology, a gesture of goodwill, a generous donation to her next charity, perhaps even lending her the Siren's Tear for her gala to mend bridges." The very idea of lending my Siren's Tear, newly acquired and polished to a blinding perfection, to Serafina, made my stomach turn. But the other thought, the one about the hospital and emotional distress, it was rather persistent. Slapping the heroine of the novel and causing her deep psychological distress would make me the bad guy, wouldn't it? The realization echoed in my mind as I inspected my golden rings for the 3rd time, stark and undeniable. The rich, cruel secondary female lead who tormented the pure, innocent protagonist. The one everyone was supposed to hate, the one who, in most narratives, got her comeuppance in a spectacular, satisfying fashion. I remembered the plots of those novels. The villainess always lost everything: her money, her looks, her reputation, her freedom, sometimes even her life. And that simply would not do. Not for me. Not for someone who had once starved. But then, a mischievous little imp of a thought, one that smelled suspiciously of expensive champagne and freshly printed banknotes, whispered in my ear. What if I didn't lose? What if I was good at being the villainess? A slow, delighted smile spread across my face. Aunt Lydia, still expecting a tearful apology, blinked in confusion. "Aunt Lydia," I said, my voice gaining strength, a new audacious resolve hardening my tone, "I will certainly give this development some thought. But I assure you, my decisions will always be in the best interest of the Vance fortune, and my own considerable personal happiness. Because even if I was the villainess, I still loved money. I still loved this blue rock, and I still loved myself. And a villainess with unlimited funds, impeccable taste, and a delightfully sharp wit. Now that sounded like a much more interesting story than a simping, heartbreak-bound Elise Vance. The thought of it, of embracing this new role, filled me with a perverse, exhilarating sense of freedom. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't an ending. Maybe this was just the beginning of my favourite chapter. A faint, metallic scent wafted from the Siren's Tear, which I had summarily retrieved and had placed on a velvet stand in my personal dressing room. It caught the light, winking at me. A villainess and her treasure. What a delightful pairing. I wondered how Serafina was doing in the hospital, probably generating excellent material for her next dramatic monologue. And I wondered what treasures I could acquire next. A grander estate? A private island? The possibilities, much like my bank account, were limitless. I stood up. The prospect of being the villainess, the one who wasn't afraid to slap sense or ill-gotten demanding tendencies into people, rather appealed to my practical, money-loving soul. After all, if I was going to be hated, I might as well be rich and fabulous while doing it. The game, it seemed, had only just begun, and I intended to win. The next morning, the grand foyer of the Vance mansion, usually a quiet expanse of marble and antique art, buzzed with an unfamiliar tension. Aunt Lydia, looking far more composed than the previous evening, approached me with Miss Clara Chun, my new and impossibly efficient personal assistant, trailing dutifully behind her. She held a rather thick file, its contents, I presumed, directly related to Serafina Thorne and her severe emotional distress. "Elise, dear," Aunt Lydia began, her voice carefully modulated to convey concern without losing an ounce of her usual imperiousness. "I have spoken with the family solicitor. While your enthusiastic defence of our assets is understood, the optics of Serafina's current state are, shall we say, less than ideal for the Vance name, especially with the upcoming charity gala circuit." I arched a brow. "My assets are secure, Aunt, and Serafina's state is hardly my responsibility. She asked for my money, then my land, then my necklace. I merely got my money back, bought the land, then bought the necklace. They're mine." Clara cleared her throat delicately. "Madam, I have compiled a report on Miss Thorne's alleged emotional distress, including medical records and social media sentiment. It appears the severe emotional distress is primarily a result of public humiliation and a bruised ego, rather than any lasting physical damage from your disciplinary actions." She offered a small, almost imperceptible smirk. Miss Clara Chun, I was learning, appreciated efficiency and results, even if they were obtained with a swift, open palm. Aunt Lydia, however, was not mollified. "Regardless of the physical severity, Elise, the perception is damaging. The family believes a gesture of appeasement is in order, a public declaration, perhaps, of continued goodwill, and a significant donation to one of her charities. Something, anything, to quell the whispers." My eyes narrowed. Quell the whispers, or appease Serafina and return to my role as her personal ATM? I suspected the latter. The thought of pouring my money into one of Serafina's vaguely defined charities, which I knew from the novel usually involved lavish events and minimal actual charitable output, made my skin crawl. It felt too dangerously close to reverting to the simp role I had so definitively rejected. "A donation, you say?" I mused, tapping a manicured nail against my chin. "To which of her noble causes? The Save the Rare Butterflies by Hosting a Ball Foundation? Or perhaps the Funding Julian's Next Ill-Fated Venture initiative?" Aunt Lydia's lips thinned. "Elisa, this is not a joking matter. The solicitor suggests that a continued pattern of antagonism, especially resulting in hospitalization, could lead to legal complications." Legal complications? That was a new threat. My love for money extended to not spending it on legal fees, for frivolous lawsuits, even if I was confident I'd win. Still, the idea of being constrained, of having my hands tied by frivolous demands, chafed. Thinking of this, I resisted the urge to slap Aunt Lydia directly for her insolent demands for Serafina's sake and turned to the assistant. "Madame," Clara Chun said smoothly, as if sensing my internal debate, I have located a rather obscure but highly impactful local historical preservation society. They are struggling to acquire a specific landmark, the old Hawthorne house, which is currently owned by an elderly couple who wish to sell, but only to a party that genuinely intends to preserve its historical integrity, not demolish it for a new development. My interest, which had been flagging, instantly piqued. Hawthorne House. I remembered that name. It was a minor plot point in the novel, a beautiful, dilapidated old mansion that Serafina had briefly taken an interest in, only to discard it when a more glamorous opportunity arose. Julian, her true love, had even considered purchasing it at one point, hoping to impress her, but his finances, as usual, had been a barrier. Miss Clara Chun continued, flipping expertly through her file. It's widely beloved by the local community. A donation to secure its preservation would be viewed as genuinely philanthropic, politically astute, and, might I add, completely untainted by any association with Miss Thorne. She paused, then added, her gaze meeting mine with a conspiratorial gleam. It also happens that Miss Thorne's family has been trying for years to acquire Hawthorne House as an annex for their own estate, and have been repeatedly rejected due to their known plans for modernisation that would compromise its historical value. A slow smile spread across my face. This was perfect. A gesture of goodwill that would bolster my public image, effectively donate money without actually giving it to Serafina, and subtly, yet decisively, thwart her family's long-standing ambition, all while securing a valuable piece of local heritage that was, coincidentally, a rather shrewd investment in historical real estate. And it would infuriate Serafina to no end, without me lifting a finger against her directly. Villainous, indeed. A strategic villainess. Excellent, Clara Chun, I said, a pleased power in my voice. Contact the Historical Preservation Society immediately. Make a generous, anonymous donation to cover the full purchase price of Hawthorne House. Ensure the funds are earmarked specifically for its acquisition and initial restoration. And then, make sure the local papers are informed, anonymously of course, of this benevolent act. We wouldn't want the community to think the Vance family lacked cultural appreciation, would we? Miss Clara Chun allowed herself a tiny, almost imperceptible smile. Consider it done, madam. Aunt Lydia, despite her lingering disapproval, couldn't deny the cleverness of the move. It was an elegant solution, sidestepping her demands while still achieving my own goals. She merely sniffed and adjusted her pearls. Just try not to hit anyone else, Elise. No promises, Aunt, I replied, my smile widening, but I assure you my future actions will be entirely in keeping with my newfound appreciation for strategic philanthropy. As Aunt Lydia retreated, muttering about the younger generation's unfathomable methods, I felt a surge of exhilaration. Being the villainess wasn't about being mean for the sake of it. It was about controlling the narrative. It was about using my formidable resources, both financial and apparently physical, to carve out my own destiny, free from the constraints of a pre-written plot. Absurd. I gazed out the window, a sliver of the morning sun catching the diamond on my finger. I heard later that Serafina's family was drained dry by Julian, but she was busy chasing after him anyways. It wasn't my problem anymore. When she saw me at another auction, she visibly flinched and covered her cheek. It seemed that her therapy visits were working. It wasn't my problem anymore. The world, it seemed, was my oyster, and I was going to eat every single pearl